Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Jody Ann's Kitchen, Food for Thought. Before I get started on today's topic, I thought I would share with you my sunflower seed sprouts. This is the little gadget that you just set in the mouth of a jar, a canning jar, a wide mouth, and then you have your seeds that you soak for a couple days, and then you rinse them, soak and rinse. And then they start sending out roots and they reach down into the water. So these sprouts up here, I can clip off. I'm going to break off the seeds and they'll add a lot of crunch and flavor and protein to my salads. So I did buy two of these little insets so that I can have two sets going because it took about a week to get that far along. So I figure if I stagger them, I every few days I can have some sunflower seed sprouts. So that's been fun. Um, Now today's topic is actually two topics. It's two different food systems that I've had to use in my life to deal with inflammation and various symptoms. And I just thought I'd kind of go over them a little bit in case they were perhaps new to some of you. One of them is the blood type diet, based on Dr. Adamo's book, Eat Right for Your Type. And I still follow that to this day. I got started on that in my 30s, kind of drifted away from it, and then came back when I was having a lot of allergy and sinus infections, like regularly. And a naturopathic doctor said, well, do you know your blood type? I said, yes, I know about being a type A positive blood type, the type A diet, what's involved. He said, well, I think you need to return to that because I think you can get off your medications and put an end to these infections if you do. And he was right. And that was fantastic. That was in 2015 when I first moved um, to Youngstown, which is where I am now. So the blood type diet is one fascinating read. It talks about the origins of the different blood types, the different civilizations and different agriculture and seasonal differences around the world, like the agrarian societies in the hotter climates and the more meat-based diets in the colder northern climates. And he goes into human history to see how the blood type that we have now evolved over time, depending on what food supplies were available and so on. Of course, today people live in climate controlled, a lot of people, not everybody, but many of us live in a climate controlled environment. So where we are in the world and what the outside temperature is and what the local farming can do is not as relevant to what foods we can access, but it still makes a difference in what your body can process. And part of the reason I was excited when I first read this book was when I read what the type A foods were, the ones that were very beneficial for my system. They were all things that I loved. And the foods that I should avoid were things that I had already figured out. I felt better if I avoided them. The avoid list for type A is meat and dairy. So that's pretty much when I went vegetarian, almost vegan, was because of the blood type diet. But I also, um, I drifted away from it because I found that I could still feel reasonably good even if I wasn't following the diet. And it was hard because sometimes other people in your household are a different type. Um, but I did develop cancer. So who knows if I would have stuck with that diet, if I could have avoided that whole side trip that I went on for a number of years. But after my cancer experience started, I also went vegan, which was also very similar to the blood type diet. Again, a predominance of soy, certain kinds of beans, not all beans, lentils, a lot of dark greens were all beneficial foods, avocado, pineapple, olive oil, flaxseed oil, but not other oils. So there are very specific lists that if you choose to read about this or Google it, you can print out a list of suggested foods depending on your blood type. And an easy way to see if it works for you is just try to very strictly follow that list for like 2 weeks and see if you feel any different. See if your skin clears up or your mild indigestion ends or anything like that. If you can, try it for a couple weeks. Then eat a big serving of something that's on the avoid list and see if you get a reaction. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of supplementation or anything to do this. It's just looking at categories of food. So that's something you might be interested in or may have heard about, may have considered. I think it's pretty valid based on my own experience within my body, but I still to this day struggle to remember things I should and shouldn't eat. Like, okay, white potatoes, no, but sweet potatoes, yes, and so on. And what complicated that was after I became vegan, now there were really fabulous protein sources and things that the vegan world focused on that maybe weren't on my type A list and so on. So it was getting a little trickier to navigate. And then long after my cancer journey and navigating all of those things, in 2020, I had a lot of intestinal issues. I won't go into the charming details, but a friend of mine suggested that some of the symptoms she had from a similar kind of issue had been alleviated by the FODMAP diet, and that's spelled FODMAP. And here I have a visual for those of you who are visual. This is actually a cookbook if you're trying to follow the FODMAP dietary restrictions and you're vegan. I was thrilled that there was a book that had that combo in it because that's where I'm at. Now, FODMAPs are a type of sugar, different types of sugars that occur in different kinds of foods. And FODMAP is an acronym. I'm looking for what it stands for. I'm probably not going to find it right now. I long ago knew what it was. Um, but it's different categories of sugars, and they're not the kind of sugars you're used to. For example, one of the categories includes garlic and onion. Um, Another category might include beets and a couple other kinds of root vegetables. So what happens when you try to adhere to this diet is you're avoiding a whole different category of food types. So if you're already somewhat limited, now you're layering this on, it can get tricky. So I had to actually print out lists to put on my refrigerator and remind me what should I be avoiding. And as I did that, I found that my symptoms did lessen. They didn't go away. So when I went to my gastroenterologist and told him what I was doing, he said, well, we can do a test to see if you have an intestinal, it's called an overgrowth, not an infection, but an intestinal overgrowth of a type of bacteria that shouldn't be in your small intestine. He said, it sounds like you have SIBO, which is SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. It's bacteria that should be in your large intestine or your stomach. I don't remember which, so I'm not a doctor, so don't quote me on any of this. But I had this situation that was confirmed by tests that were done where I drank some glucose and then I breathed into containers every so many minutes for a period of hours, and they measured, I don't know if it was carbon dioxide or methane, some kind of gas that they could detect in my breath after eating that shouldn't be there that confirmed this diagnosis. Anyway, that in itself was pretty interesting. It was totally painless, and I did it at home and mailed it in because, of course, it was 2020, so lots of things were being done at home and sent into the lab. So they confirmed that, had a treatment for it, this vastly expensive antibiotic that I was very blessed to have covered by my insurance. The friend who alerted me to this whole FODMAP category of foods was not as fortunate. Her insurance didn't cover it, so she has just been following this restricted diet for her life. It's like it's a permanent situation for her. I was fortunate. I got the treatment, and then the next step was to try to reintroduce some of those foods to see if I could now tolerate them. So there was an app that I used that listed every food you should and shouldn't eat. You could record in a diary what you were eating. And there was a section where you could gradually reintroduce of the 6 different types of sugars each week, a different one to see what would happen. Well, what happened was I was able to reintroduce everything except the group that included garlic and onion. And I was really very frustrated at the time. I tried the reintroduction test over the next few months. It's just, even though the overgrowth in my small intestine was supposedly cleared, apparently there's a lingering aspect of that that I just can't process garlic and onion. Now, cooked onion sometimes is not quite as dramatic as garlic, like even a little bit of garlic powder that might be used to flavor a chip or something is a problem. But there's a solution in every problem, right? So what I discovered from the low FODMAP diet is that you can get infused olive oils, like garlic infused olive oil or leek infused olive oil or shallot. They're all different kinds of things. And when you infuse the flavor of the garlic, for example, into the olive oil, there's no little tiny actual particles of garlic in there. It's just the essence of it is in there. I can tolerate that. I can cook with it. I can add a teaspoon of it to a recipe that's asking for garlic powder, and I can use this instead. It's subtle. It's not as fabulous as, like the smell of cooking or roasting garlic, but it's the next best thing. And it's better than being totally without garlic, because to me, that's one of the great flavors. So the low FODMAP situation is, again, you can learn more about it, you can read about it, and there's a university out of Australia that created an app that, as far as I know, is the only one that exists out there for your phone, and you can look up certain foods and have a diary to compare and figure out what food might be bothering you. It explains the 6 categories of the FODMAP foods. But being low FODMAP and watching my type A foods and being vegan means I've got 3 levels of lists and do's and don'ts and a little of this, but avoid that I have to constantly rearrange in my brain if I'm eating out. Even now, because I've been doing all of this for a number of years, it's still tricky. It's like, well, I haven't had any bad episodes lately, so maybe I can eat this food now. Well, as my naturopathic doctor reminded me, sometimes you can have inflammation and not know about it. You might have a big, horrible symptom from it, but you might um, not be absorbing your vitamins and your supplements the way you should. Or, um, it could be possibly contributing to osteoporosis, which is like a word none of us wants to hear. So I continue to review my lists and rewrite my post-it notes reminders that I put on my refrigerator. I actually put another list up there just today, which is why this topic was on my mind, because I realized that in the last week, I've just been going crazy eating all the foods that are not recommended for my type A blood type, which is peppers, eggplants, onion, white potatoes. And I said, well, maybe that's why I've been feeling just a little bit off, because I was starting to feel invincible, like I could eat any kind of vegetable and no problem, but not every vegetable is the same. And there's also some wisdom to not eating a food from the avoid list every day. Maybe you can have it one serving of it once every 4 or 5 days and be fine. But you don't want it every day. Like, don't make an amazing pasta sauce from tofu that uses roasted red peppers and eat it, 3 days in a row. Well, maybe that wasn't a smart thing to do. Maybe I should freeze some of it next time so I can space out the foods that I know can cause inflammation. There are certain reactions that are bad enough that, yeah, you'll never eat that food again, and you'll always remember that you shouldn't have that food. And for me, that's garlic, unfortunately. But again, on the brighter side, you can learn about substitutions and different items. What I really found amazing is that onions don't create a real bad problem, but leeks, which I had only ever had like leek soup. I'd never bought fresh leek in the store. You know, they're white on the bottom, they're big and round, they're like this tall. A mature one is. I don't seem to have a problem with leek. So now I buy a bundle of leeks probably once a month, and I slice them up into like half-inch rounds and freeze them. And sometimes I've tried freezing them in water. That doesn't seem to work any better than just freezing them in just whole in a like an airtight bag. And I can pull one out and defrost it for a little bit, like maybe an hour on the counter, and mince it up and use it in place of onion. And I can get an amazing flavor. And leeks are kind of oniony, but they're a little softer, sweeter kind of flavor. I actually, now that I've gotten used to using them, I prefer that flavor to onion in a lot of my dishes. So I'll use that to like make up like a vegan tuna salad or chicken salad kind of thing where I'm using a vegan protein, but I want to have some mayonnaise and maybe normally you'd put in garlic or onion. I can just put some minced leek in and I get that extra pop of flavor. So, regardless of what situation you might be dealing with, any kind of limits that you might have with your diet, there are a lot of different systems out there that might, first of all, they might give you a clue as to what's going on. Instead of worrying about eating everything, you could have a list and say, okay, if I just avoid these things and I feel better in a couple weeks, wow, it's a blood type thing. Or conversely, it might be a low FODMAP kind of issue. And if you're catching it before you have a full-blown infection, a bacterial overgrowth in your system, then that'll save you a lot of frustration and probably a lot of money as well, because the treatment is quite expensive. So just wanted to share those two um, overlaying systems. As I say, there is a book for low FODMAP and vegan, which is fabulous, and I've used a number of recipes out of this book. I don't know yet if there's a book that's low FODMAP, my blood type, and vegan. Maybe that's something I should look at. I don't know how many people fall into that category, but for now, just know that there are some systems out there that might help make sense for you and might make sense for addressing any kind of inflammation or discomfort that might be going on in your body. Because now I can eat and feel very satisfied and have fabulous new recipes to try even all the time. And as long as I don't eat any of the avoid foods from any of these lists, there's still a lot left that I can choose from and still enjoy amazing, amazing meals. And a lot of restaurants will also be very helpful. I have found that checking to find out that there's no garlic in something, it doesn't seem to phase any kind of restaurant I've ever been to. They all seem to know what has garlic in it and they know what dishes don't, or they can sometimes even offer not to include it. It's not a strange request by any means. It's not like saying, I want to know if anything you have is vegan. That involves a lot more detective work. Avoiding garlic for me has not been a big issue, except that I miss it. And, what are you going to do? Don't want that side effect. So I guess I'm going to miss it. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting, maybe piqued your curiosity about some terms or topics you've never heard of. And I will check in again with some more information next time. You guys take care.